So 2020 was a pretty interesting year.
More than interesting. It's the craziest year I've ever lived in my life.
I would totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And the thing that really gets me about it, despite all the other crazy stuff,
Sure.
was really how a lot of corporations, I felt, really botched big launches with
Sure.
the video games, movies, and other types of media.
Yes.
Especially with comic books.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really gets me here is that a lot of these companies are making decisions based off of short-term problems or feelings.
Sure.
Rather than trying to think long term
Of course.
about their reputation and their ability to make sales in the future.
Yes.
You know, goodwill is something that you can't buy, but you sure enough can destroy it very easily.
Well, I think that comes down to the weird part is American companies they don't used to operate like that.
That's correct.
They used to operate in very long term. They have very long strategy. And you can even talk about Amazon being one of those companies. Because I remember very early on, years ago, when I think this is within the first 5-6 years of Amazon being existing,
Right.
there was an interview given, and Jeff Bezos himself said, they were like, well, you have this Amazon company and still in the red and everything. He goes, yeah, we plan for Amazon to lose money in the first 5 to 10 years. Like he just knew we're going to be losing money for almost as long as 10 years before we can start operating with money coming in. And that's a really long-term thinking. And of course, look at where he is now. 20 years later, richest man in the world, biggest company in the world. So I think, long-term plan is that you can say, okay, we're not gaining anything right now. It looks like we're not doing anything, but in the long run, it's gonna switch around for us.
Well, that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
A big part of this is myopic thinking about how things are actually working.
Sure.
Quite often, these executives are basing their entire work off of short-term bonuses for how they're performing for that quarter, month, or year.
Yes.
And it's all tied to certain launch release dates. And so the way in which they're being compensated actually encourages short-term thinking and behavior at the expense of everything in the future, which is totally wrong. And I would have to say really counterproductive to the actual goals of the company.
Sure. Well, I think one of the problems now is because people tend to jump from company to company.
Yeah.
Once somebody offers you something bigger, you go.
Right.
As opposed to back then, the older ways is that you're with a company. I'm with this company for 20 years, 30 years sometimes, my whole lifetime. So you really climb the corporate ladder, going from very low and then all the way to the top. And then, of course, because you know the every nooks and crannies of the business, because you started very low. And then once you're at the top, you know what needs to be fixed. You know how things were done before and can be maintained a certain way, what needs to change. We don't really have that anymore. Nowadays, they get guys that come out of college or so and then put them into a management role right away and never really start from the bottom.
Right.
And then somewhere along the line, they're a few steps missing. And when things go wrong, they don't know where it went wrong.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm all for becoming your own boss and taking charge of your career. That's something
of course.
I 100%
Nothing
support.
wrong with that, yes.
My issue, sort of similar to what you were saying, is when the goals of the organization long term are actually in conflict and direct contrast with what's going on short term.
Yes.
If you look at really where they're working right now, let's take the movie industry for example.
Sure.
They had a lot of smaller movies in the past to sort of float them as they're working towards their big summer blockbusters.
Yes. And big summer blockbusters used to be 1 or 2 per year, and that's it.
Correct.
Now they're trying to launch blockbuster every month.
And so here's the issue. Here's something you have to consider. When everything you're doing and the majority of the revenue for your company is resting off of one release, now suddenly it becomes far more serious about making sure that it launches the way in which you want it to. You have less grace and less wiggle room in order to try something different, make something more interesting, and try to push something out.
Well, even Marvel's, Kevin Feige has once said all he cares about is that first weekend launch.
Yes.
He doesn't care about what happens afterwards. As opposed to back then, they would put out a movie and then sometimes it would gain momentum and kept going.
That's true.
Like the very first Superman movie, the Christopher Reeve Superman movie, 78. That thing, they said was like number 1 for like 13 weeks or something.
I think about Avatar.
Yeah. And,
think how long that movie was in theaters, and it was just crushing the box office for a long time.
I think Superman, they said, was in run in the theater for 13 months or so. And that's unheard of today, that you can keep a movie in a theater for more than a year, 13 months. That's now it's like we're in it for a month and then it's usually out the way, even if it's a big blockbuster. You're lucky you get 3 months out of it.
Oh, that's correct.
Yeah.
And they're trying to go do a global box office right now. They're trying to release it to a global audience,
Sure.
which is fine. But here's the issue with all of this, and I'm gonna take it away from movies and bring it to everything all at once.
Yeah.
Goodwill is something that's very hard to get.
That is true.
And I feel a lot of companies nowadays are sort of trying to throw that to the wayside for immediate cash.
Yeah.
Take CD Projekt Red right now with their game Cyberpunk 2077. They were, before this, lauded as one of the most ethical and great gaming companies out there right now. But because they launched the game in such a broken state, and they took people's money when they gave them an unfinished product, especially if you have it on the earlier editions for Xbox or PlayStation 4, people are actually in revolt against them now. They're anti-CD Projekt Red, which is quite sad. Yeah. And people have been waiting for this game for 12 years.
12 years.
And
that's really, really shooting for a long-term plan.
Right. But they
not sticking the landing.
They didn't stick the landing. Yeah. They launched it before it was time. If you've been waiting that long, what's a few more months?
No, they're probably trying to hit the Christmas crowd.
Right, and that's a problem because now they're in trouble with Sony right now. They actually delisted it from their store, which has never happened before.
Wow.
They promised all of these refunds, and now they're sure they made a bunch of money.
No, refunding is always a bigger problem. Right. Because when you make the money, you're already dividing up between distribution and other companies involved. Now, you don't really have that big of a whole lump sum to give back.
Right. So it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Another great example of this, I guess, would just be in the movie industry. If you look at the last Avengers movie, we already did a video about it. We're not huge fans of the last one, Endgame, but
it dropped some goodwill in the process.
Right.
The last one, and we won't really know how well it did. Because Black Widow kept getting pushed back, and now Black Widow may suffer tremendously because I think the longer it takes for people to be seeing something in the public eye, the less interest you'll have.
Right.
Something else is going to pop up and take its place.
Right. And so this gets me to really one of the most important corporate lessons that we could ever learn is you need to establish the values of your company at a high level and then make sure that everyone buys into it.
Yes.
And if you look at it, there's a huge chasm, I feel, between what the board of directors and the C-suite executives want. Versus the everyday workers one.
Of course.
And there's, I guess, a lack of trust between the community and what these people using corporate speak often do.
Yes.
They'll say, oh, yeah, we missed the mark this time. We'll do better next time.
Yeah.
We're going to take this as a learning experience.
Disney being a big one of that.
Right.
Where if you listen to some of their shareholder reports, it's kind of like glossing over a lot of details. Just trust in us. It'll be great.
Right.
And you kind of go, man, we don't used to American companies don't used to operate like that.
Right. Yeah. And here's something that you'll learn in business school, which is 100% correct. It's better than having, success in the current, having long-term sustained success.
Yes.
A competitive advantage, meaning that you have something that other people can't easily reproduce.
Of course.
And you can do it in perpetuity.
Yeah.
That's something that they're just throwing out the window right now.
Oh, especially in the comic book industry. Marvel and DC used to dominate because they have unique characters and loyal fan base.
Yes.
Now the recent word is DC's, maybe trimming down to like 30 books or something like that.
Which is anemic for them.
Yeah, which is nothing. And this is even going to be the longer, when you talk about long-term effect, DC is going to shrink and shrink and shrink. Because maybe you can sustain it with 52 books. But once you cut that almost in half, you're not able to, the bookstores that, the comic book shop that order this stuff, they're going to lose half their profit. So it'll be harder for them to operate. And that's just going to go into vicious cycles. Then they're going to be harder to operate. Marvel Comics is also probably going to go through a shrinking stage too at this point. Because DC has dropped in sales, you're going to have a lot of stores go under. Marvel is going to be put into the position of cutting more books too.
Right.
And it just is spiraling downhill. And then suddenly nobody's producing comic books anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why there's no long term. As opposed to back then, where Marvel, where DC, I have Spider-Man, you have Batman. These things can float the company almost forever. And they should, because nobody else has these products. and because comic book is a more or less a monthly kind of production, you can project things for a whole year
very easily. Yeah. And if you look at the way in which they've operated and done business, it's really quite a shame.
Yeah.
They got stuck into trying to do empire building, which is generally not a good idea.
No.
Trying to take on too many parts of businesses that you're not good at.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why you have business partners and you do business with other companies is number one, they can specialize in it.
Yes.
They can operate at a cheaper and more efficient fashion than they can.
Yeah.
And then on top of that too, they can actually take on other business easier
and
actually make it cheaper for them to actually do business with you. But if now suddenly you're the sole person and the reason why they're existing, that's actually more expensive.
It's true, because nobody's there to bear the load. If somebody else is there, two people can share the load and share the resources, and you can make it go further.
Well, and who was the guy that actually made that decision to go and buy the distributing company? I forget the guy's name.
That was, we're talking about Marvel Comics back then?
From Marvel's, yeah.
And I don't know who. The guy who ran it at the time was president, Terry Stewart.
Right.
I don't know if he was the one who made the decisions. But overall, Marvel in the mid '90s was just on a huge, gobble them up type of thing. They did well with building. They did well with Fleer, so they're like, we're going to buy it, which was a trading card company. We're going to buy them, so we can produce our own cards now. They were doing well with Toy Biz, so they're going to go buy Toy Biz. And it was just kind of like we just kept building, and then what really toppled them was getting distribution. They couldn't manage that. They didn't know how to manage that, so it all fell apart.
Well, it makes them inflexible. They can't easily change the way in which they're operating or doing business because now they have all these assets and all of these people that they're now responsible for.
Yeah, and then ever since then, they crippled. First, they crippled the distribution industry. So everybody scrambled. Every company scrambled. Every distributor scrambled.
Well, they were working regionally. That was the problem. Is that they were trying to take a regional distribution system and try to take it nationally and internationally.
Yeah.
Terrible idea.
Terrible idea. Yeah. Because they didn't have the resources or the powers to do it.
The know-how to do it.
Yep. So that crippled the distribution system, and which led to a domino effect of eventually just destroying the distribution system.
Right.
They only had Diamond left, and Diamond at that point, the guy who I've heard for years that runs it, and I wouldn't say run, but owns it, never cared about it because it was kind of like a side thing. So he wasn't thinking, okay, now I can cut better deals and increase my reach. It was just kind of we're just gonna kind of like just a little money thing where you can just siphon a little bit of money off. And nobody was pushing to build a bigger distribution system in the process. It was just there, and it was just there.
Well, why didn't they go and buy Diamond at that point? They might as well.
Oh, they couldn't afford it back then, probably. Well, also, I think the main reason was the guy who was running Hero World, which was the third largest at the time. I think he was also done. He was ready to retire, so he just, I'm ready to unload. And Marvel was like, okay, I'll take it. Without realizing what they were doing.
Well, they were dealing with a pillar of the industry that I don't think they were really comfortable with really playing with, or they should have been playing with.
Well,
because the second that they made it only for Marvel, that fundamentally changed the...
They changed the way everybody operated. Yeah, the game was changed. They should have just, okay, well, own it, well, run it, and slowly increase on that, and then maybe eat the other. But the decision made like immediately, which sent everyone to a panic.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to think about why the government rolls things out slowly over time.
Sure.
Instead of just being like, tomorrow, everyone's on Obamacare.
Yeah.
Everyone's off of Obamacare. Everything's changing tomorrow.
Sure.
It doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work that way.
And it shouldn't work that way.
Yeah.
If they had just decided that they're going to just take a larger cut off of things that are not Marvel,
sure,
that would have been brilliant.
That would have been okay too.
Because then you're making money off of other people's work.
Yes.
That's even easier. Why would you be in competition with someone that's not in competition with you?
That's just people who didn't know what they were doing and probably a little too much greed. Because Marvel was really running on greed at the time. They just thought we just need to put out more books. We need to be bigger, and they had the money and the power to do it too. I think it blindsided people a lot of times. And because the money was coming in so easily. So everybody think it's just easy to keep this thing going. Not realizing, they wanted a bigger table, but the legs they were using were still the old smaller legs that wasn't able to hold it up. That was kind of the problem with that. They didn't know where to build their own foundation. They didn't spend time investigating into that and says, okay, what is this? Look at Marvel also bought Malibu Comics at the time. Marvel Comics was its own functional company. They gobbled up, and not much was ever really done with it. The best thing that came out of that was Men in Black.
Yeah,
was a big movie.
Well, it's a big lost opportunity in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
And if you look at it, Disney especially, if you look at all the companies that they've bought out recently,
they're kind of doing the same thing too. But look at now when something goes wrong because of COVID, and the whole industry shifts. They're barely able to operate.
They're not flexible. No. And on top of that, too, they're not actually doing as much as it could have been if every company was doing its own work.
Sure.
Because every company has an incentive to maximize the products that are available to it.
Well, if what it is to be honest, if let's say, okay, they never bought off Marvel, they never bought off Star Wars, when things go wrong, they don't have to shoulder the burden of those. Even buying Fox, they don't have to shoulder the burden of that kind of stuff. These companies can just go, or Disney can say, we're just going to limit our ties to you, the way we conduct business. Then Marvel have to save themselves, and George Lucas may have to try to save Star Wars on their own. But on their own, they're much easier to manage. So everybody can get by for a few years, and then when the board is cleared again, we can,
resume business.
Yeah, resume business. Reshuffle the cards and resume business. And everyone can maybe then be like, oh, well, Marvel want to partner up with Warner or something like that. Well,
it's considered really sexy to do an acquisition.
It really is.
You're just like, man, we just bought this company. We just bought
Marvel. Yeah.
We just did that. It's great.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not. Not in the long run. Because people never plan for days like this when things could go wrong.
They don't.
Yeah. When money is flowing too easily, it becomes... it just thinks like it's going to last forever.
Well, it's a pipe dream if you really think about it. It's sort of like the whole idea of you have 7 years of famine, and then you have 7 years of, just abundance.
Yeah.
And what the problem is that people forget when it's...
when the bad comes. When the bad times arrive. Yeah.
That's exactly
people
correct.
Forget that. That's why you want to run a very lean and trimmed business.
Lean is not something that Disney's done.
No, Disney has not done that.
The big problem too is when you acquire a new company, it fundamentally changes the culture of both companies.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to really consolidate and really change your operations to maximize both companies again. And the more they keep on taking on more companies, you have repeated processes. Now that you have a lot of extra bloated staff that now you really don't know how to incorporate.
Here's the other problem I think with Disney and some of these big companies like Marvel. I think they're run by people who are not really operating the modern day way of business.
No.
You talk about companies like Netflix and Amazon, which can do really well. Because they already spend like 10, 20 years operating the modern day form of business.
Correct.
On the internet, we don't have a huge warehouse to host this stuff. Well, Disney has a big piece of property that we put our amusement park on, and we can make money when people come. They send products to you directly in where you are, as opposed to needing people to come over here. Same thing with comic books. You have to go to a comic book shop to buy a comic book. Same thing with movies. You have to go to a movie theater to see a movie. I just think because these companies that took advantage of where technology was going, and they shifted the focus in that direction and just kept going. That's why these companies do far better than these older dinosaurs.
You have to also think about this too.
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of power and assets doesn't mean that they have the requisite ability or will to actually make the pivot and change.
Sure.
You know what they're doing with Disney Plus right now. I don't think they're really as successful as they really think they are.
I think that's going to crash and burn at some point.
Well, I was talking to my mother the other day, and she's like, "Yeah, we had Disney Plus for a little while, but they didn't have anything on there that I really enjoyed."
Sure.
And after she finished watching the few shows that she liked, there was no reason to keep it.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem. You compare that to something like Netflix. Think about this.
Sure.
They not only have their own TV shows on there, they have stuff that you've never seen before from other people.
Yes.
And sure, Disney is popular and successful.
Yeah.
It has dozens of shows and movies that people love. You've seen it already.
Yeah. Well, the other problem is Disney tend to turn everything very bland these days.
Yes.
As opposed to, you look at older Disney stuff. He didn't become successful just because I was bringing family entertainment. His family entertainment had an edge to it.
It was hardcore.
Yeah, it was hardcore. Yeah, either the story really get dark sometimes, or he was pushing the technical aspect, where animation.
Look at Snow White, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
That's a dark story.
Sure, dark story because she died at one point.
Yes.
And
he has to go slay a freaking dragon.
Yes, but they were also pushing the bounds of animation in technology and all that kind of stuff, movie making and everything. You don't really feel like that with Disney products in the past 10 years or so. Because every Marvel you go see, it feels the same.
A little samey,
yeah,
a little safe.
Yeah, a little
safe.
Safe.
Except for Infinity War.
Infinity War, yeah, which they went they went out a little bit, but then quickly kind of pulled back
in
Endgame. Yeah. And you kind of go, yeah, but people want escape entertainment to really, wake them up a little bit instead of be like, that's beautiful, that's wonderful. I think that's the problem with Disney in the recent years, and I think they crippled themselves in the process.
Well, I mean, it goes back to an earlier statement, that you and I often really attribute to it. It's better to either be very distinct in who you are than try to appeal to every audience.
Yes.
It's just like sort of going back to action movies, It's better to be a pro-America movie and be distinctly American than to just be like this globalist
there's weird global idea, but then there's no clear identity.
Right.
Where nobody can gravitate to. Like, here's the thing, because I grew up in Taiwan younger days. We used to see American movies or American TV show because nobody else can do it like that.
Well, that's true.
The writing was different, the culture was different. Something you watch it because of culture envy. Like, oh, look at America, look at the cars they're driving. Because in Taiwan we used to be poor, so most people don't even have cars at the time. You look out the window, it's farmland, but you look, oh, look in New York City, got tall buildings, nobody has like that.
Right, exactly.
But they're not really presenting that aspect of it.
True.
And it's almost like very downplayed, or it's not even noticeable. And I think that's kind of the problem with these things that try to be, everything for everybody, and then you became nothing.
Well, that's exactly correct. Yeah. I mean, people like French movies because it has a certain aesthetic, a certain pacing, certain themes.
Sure, you watch anime for the same reason.
Right.
You don't watch it because it's
globalist.
Oh, it's global. It's like, well, there's certain things Japanese people like, and I kind of like some of it. There are things you criticize, going, oh, that's kind of dumb.
But it's still distinct.
As opposed to back then when you watch American cartoon, it's American cartoon.
That's correct.
And they used to stand out, and they get praised for something it's funny because the Japanese overall praise American animation. They actually see it as a higher standard than anime for the longest time. I remember when the Iron Giant came out. That thing got like unbelievably rave reviews in Japan. Like, it floored everybody. They were kind of questioning, like, why can't we do something like this with our giant robot genre? And even now, when you talk to like hardcore Transformer fans in Japan, they praise American Transformers as the better Transformers series. We talk about the original G1 stuff,
right?
Because there were just a little bit more maturity in the way they handle everything.
I would agree.
And it's not like we're just pumping out a show to sell toys. They were really making efforts to tell stories.
That's true.
But now we've kind of gone away. Everyone's like, oh, American cartoon is terrible, and we're watching anime. And anime is big on Netflix. Anime is big on online. Yeah, because we become very bland in what we present. There's either no real heroics, which is what American cartoon used to have a lot of.
Yeah.
Heroics, bravery, one man can make a difference type of concept.
I would agree.
Almost a flag waving aspect in a lot of this stuff. Go America!
You even see a loss of that in our companies in general.
Yes, that USA.
They've been dissuaded from going that way.
Yes.
And I feel it's actually corrupted us as a country and our companies too.
Yeah, because we're losing our identity. And if you don't have an identity, you can't sell anything to anybody.
Well, sure. Even look at the values that a lot of companies are starting to push now. Yeah. They're actually hating their customers.
Yeah.
Like, remember those Gillette ads that came out?
Yeah, there's that too. Well, it's weird that companies have built up a legacy for themselves, and now they're throwing it out the window.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They built up all of this goodwill over the years. Remember when Gillette used to be about firefighters and other kind of like blue-collar, hard-working men?
Yeah, because that's who they sell it to. The cheap razor blade that you buy.
Right, and now they're like, don't be a rapist. like, don't hate your daughter.
Yeah.
Like that Audi commercial. Your daughter is going to be a great driver too. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, it's really bizarre because like the people they used to sell these products to, the blue collar worker, they're very family-oriented group of people. They would never think like that. So it's like, where do you even get these concepts?
Twitter.
Twitter. Because nobody's happy on Twitter.
Right.
That's the funniest thing.
Right.
Nobody's happy on social media.
Well, it's like they bought into like the worst part of social media.
Yeah, they bought into the worst part of it and believe that's true.
And they believe that's how people really think and act nowadays. And part of that you have to think about this too, is where are they located? Where are they based?
Yeah.
A lot of these companies aren't based
Yeah.
out there in the middle of the country.
No, they're based in big cities. Big city people generally are not that happy either. Because, big city is crowded, it's expensive. And then
cost of living is just higher.
Cost of living is higher. There's more family. You don't see your family that often.
It's harder to get around.
Yeah, you're lonely most of the time.
You're surrounded by people in a congested city.
Yeah.
But you're more likely to feel alone.
You have better control over your life.
That's true.
Here's the truth. I used to live in New York. Most of the time, wanting to go somewhere, I got to go take a bus. So I am controlled by the bus schedule.
Yes.
And then or somewhere a place I can't go because I didn't drive. I would tell my parents to drive me, and that was already like in my mid-20s. I moved to Florida. First thing I got to do is get a driver's license.
Because there's no buses getting you.
There's no buses getting you anywhere. and you learn to be independent. You learn to have more control of your life. Right. Just able to drive yourself from one location to another is having control over your life.
Well, fundamentally, you have to act differently.
Yeah.
Compare someone that lives out in the woods of, let's say, Montana, and really enjoys their life and can cultivate themselves. They have to take care of their own land.
Yeah.
They have to really maintain their house in a way normal people don't have to. If you're out in like urban city centers.
Well, it's what it is. I had to learn how to do renovation of my own house recently. So living on your own, living in a place where it's not really that crowded, you have more control of your life. People don't realize that.
Right. And so if I were to say anything to a lot of these executives in these big companies, is that I really think they need to reevaluate the culture that they're cultivating.
Sure. Who they're really trying to sell
Who they're trying to sell it to.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, Twitter likes are great. And making money in the short term is great.
Yeah.
But they really need to think about who are they appealing to.
Sure.
And how they want to really be portrayed. Because right now, I think they're really throwing themselves just away entirely, and they're destroying everything they've built, and it's a shame.
Oh yeah. Well, I would probably go back to a little bit what I say. I don't think a lot of people who run these companies are happy people either. I think because their living condition and everything, if there's a lot of pressure and stress, when you're not happy, you can't cultivate a business that sells on the goodwill of what you can sell to people.
Right. And
if you're miserable, you're just selling misery.
Well, and then the worst thing about it is that they're being incentivized to act in bad fashion.
Yes, which is
because
bad too.
they're being incentivized based off of initial sales numbers.
Yeah.
They're being incentivized based off of just gross receipts.
Sure.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
But it also means that you have to do it within a certain period of time rather than putting out quality products.
Sure.
Like if the only way you're going to get your bonus for the end of the year is if you put out the video game now versus later, you have a great incentive to do it now.
Of course. But the thing is, ultimately, money doesn't make you happy. If you have a satisfying product you put out at the end, that makes you happy.
That's
more
true.
than anything else.
Well, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we're trying real hard to make sure, that we have the right attitude when we approach these products. You talk about I'm working on Only Riser, the second act right now.
Right.
I constantly have to say, I'm really enjoying the process. Even though, drawing is a pain in the butt, and most artists were self-tortured people.
Right.
Hunched over a table for hours, and you don't really see anybody. But you should approach it with a strong sense of I take pride in what I do, and I want people to see that by the time it's out, and people should feel happy when they read a story.
Right. It needs the same tender loving care as anything else.
Sure, any product should be like that.
Right. Well. So thank you guys for watching the video to the end. We greatly appreciate it. We're very passionate about these subjects.
Sure.
And we hope to really just help the industry in our own special way. We're trying to be a positive force for change and hopefully put out really great stuff in the future too.
Yeah, we'd love you guys to come to our website, check out comic books, and we love to bring you some more of everything in the future.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you guys for watching. See you.